I spent $180,000 to avoid paying $5. I destroyed a town's economy. I got myself banned from every lake, river, and beach in the state for life. All because I refused to pay a late fee on a kayak I returned 12 minutes late. If you have ever been so sure you were right about something tiny that you could not let it go, this is what happens when you take that feeling all the way to the end. I lost my retirement. I lost my reputation. I lost access to water itself. But I won the argument, and that is all that matters. It started on a Saturday afternoon in July. I rented a kayak from a small-town marina for 3 hours. I returned it 3 hours and 12 minutes later. The guy at the counter handed me a bill with a $5 late fee. I told him I was not late. He said anything over 3 hours counts as late. I said 12 minutes is not late. It is a rounding error. He said the fee stands. I told him I would not pay it. He said it would go to collections. I walked out. That night I could not sleep. It was not about the money. It was about being right. I had returned the kayak the same day. I had not damaged it. I had not stolen it. And now some guy with a clipboard was going to destroy my credit score over 12 minutes. By 3 in the morning, I had decided I was going to fight it. Not because it mattered, because I was right. The next morning, I called the marina and asked to speak to the owner. He told me the late fee was posted on the wall and I had signed a rental agreement. I told him the fee was punitive and unreasonable. He told me to have a nice day and hung up. That was the moment I stopped being reasonable. I went to the library and checked out every book they had on contract law. I read them cover to cover in 2 weeks. I learned about breach, consideration, and remedies. I learned that a contract can be voided if one party acts in bad faith. I drafted an 11-page letter to the marina owner explaining why his late fee was unenforceable. I mailed it certified. He never responded. So I filed a small claims case. I drove to the courthouse, paid the filing fee, and requested a hearing. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. I spent those 6 weeks preparing. I printed the rental agreement. I highlighted every unclear part. I made a timeline. I rehearsed my argument in the mirror every night for 42 days. On the day of the hearing, I showed up in a suit with a 3-ring binder full of evidence. The marina owner showed up in a polo shirt and flip-flops. He told the judge I was late, the fee was posted, and I had signed the agreement. The judge looked at my binder. He looked at me. He ruled in favor of the marina. He said 12 minutes is still late. The hearing lasted 4 minutes. I walked out of that courtroom angrier than I had ever been. Not because I lost, because the judge had not even looked at my evidence. I had spent 6 weeks preparing, and he dismissed me in under 5 minutes. That night, I made a decision. If the system was not going to take me seriously, I was going to find a way to make me. It take me seriously. I went back to the library. This time, I did not check out books on contract law. I checked out books on admiralty law. I had no idea what admiralty law was. I had heard someone mention it in a legal drama once, and it sounded important. The first book I opened was from 1793. It was written in a style of English I could barely read. But buried in the middle of chapter 6 was a single sentence that changed everything. It said that any structure that floats or drifts with the tide can be called a vessel, not real estate. And if it is a vessel, it falls under maritime law, not local law. I read that sentence 5 times. Then I drove back to the marina and stared at the dock. It was old. It was wooden. And it was not bolted to the ground. It was resting on pilings that shifted slightly with the tide. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. I measured the distance between the pilings and the shoreline. I checked the tide schedule, and I realized that if I could prove the dock was not stuck to land forever, I could argue that it was not subject to local laws at all. That was the moment I stopped being a person with a complaint and became a person with a mission. I spent the next year reading every maritime law case I could find. I read cases about piracy. I read cases about salvage rights. I read cases about ship registration in international waters. I learned that if a structure crosses the mean low water line and is not stuck down forever, it can be called a vessel instead. And if it is a vessel in navigable waters, it exists in a legal grey zone between state and federal law. The more I read, the more I realized I had found a loophole. A loophole no one had used in 200 years. But proving it was going to cost money. A lot of money. I needed a professional surveyor to measure the dock down to the millimeter. I needed someone who could testify in court that the pilings were not anchored below the waterline. I needed someone with credentials a judge could not ignore. So, I liquidated my retirement account. Every dollar. I took the entire balance, paid the early withdrawal penalties, and wired $50,000 to a naval surveyor in Maine. He flew out 2 weeks later with a team of assistants and spent 3 days measuring the dock. He used laser levels. He used sonar. He measured tidal drift, buoyancy, and displacement. When he was done, he handed me a 40-page report that said the dock was, by definition, a floating structure. I now had proof, and I had spent $50,000 to get it. I filed a new lawsuit. This time, I was not suing in small claims court. I was suing in Federal Admiralty Court. I argued that the $5 fee was not a late fee at all. It was a port fee. And I was right. The marina had written port fee on the invoice. That one word changed everything, because port fees can only be charged by port authorities, and port authorities can only operate on sovereign land or in international waters. The dock was a floating vessel. It was neither. So the fee was illegal. The marina hired a lawyer. The lawyer filed a motion to dismiss. The motion was denied. The case went to trial. I showed up wearing a tricorn hat from the 1700s. I told the judge I was litigating under the original rules of maritime law. The judge did not laugh. He did not dismiss me. He read my surveyor's report. He read the case law I had cited. And then he did something I did not expect. He ruled in my favor. He said that while my argument was absurd, it was technically correct. The dock was not stuck down forever. It did cross the mean low water line, and because the marina had called the fee a port fee, they had accidentally put themselves under Admiralty law. He cited a case from 1796 involving privateers and customs duties. He said the $5 fee was unenforceable. And then he went further. He said that because the dock was a vessel, it could not be taxed as real estate. It had to be taxed as a ship, and since it was not registered as a ship, it was technically operating as a sovereign entity. The marina owner went pale. The town attorney stood up and asked the judge to clarify. The judge clarified. He said that if the dock was a sovereign vessel, then every business operating on that dock was no longer subject to local property taxes. The town had been collecting taxes on the dock for 30 years. Those taxes made up nearly 40% of the town's annual revenue. And now, because of my case, all of that revenue was gone. I had won, but I had also just destroyed the town. Within 6 months, the town filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy. They froze payroll. They cut emergency services. They closed the public library. The local newspaper ran a front-page story with my photo and the headline, Hurricane Habeas. People recognized me at the grocery store. Someone slashed my tires. Someone else left a dead fish on my porch. I stopped going outside. But I had won. The $5 fee was voided. The dock was reclassified. And I had proven, in federal court, that I was right. The judge was not finished with me, though. At the end of the hearing, he said that while I had won the case, I had also caused significant harm to the community. He said my actions, while legal, were reckless. And as a consequence, he issued a permanent order, banning me from setting foot on any navigable body of water in the state. That included lakes, rivers, beaches, even puddles and parking lots, if they were large enough. I was now legally landlocked. I appealed. The appeal was denied. I hired another lawyer. The second appeal was denied. I filed a petition for review. It was denied. I was out of options. I had spent 4 years and every dollar I had to win a $5 argument. And in the process, I had destroyed a town, lost my savings, and banned myself from water for the rest of my life. I framed the invoice. It is hanging on the wall above my desk. It is crumpled and faded and covered in coffee stains. But it is mine. It is proof that I was right. It is proof that I followed my principles all the way to the end, no matter what it cost. People ask me if I regret it. I tell them no, because regret would mean admitting I was wrong. And I was not wrong. I was late by 12 minutes. That is not late. That is a rounding error. And I was willing to spend everything I had to prove it. Behavioral economists have started citing my case as the ultimate example of the sunk cost fallacy. They say I spent $180,000 to avoid a $5 loss. They say I let my ego destroy my life. They say I should have just paid the fee and moved on. But they are missing the point. It was never about the $5. It was about being right. And I was right. The town recovered eventually. They restructured their debt. They raised taxes on everyone else. They sold the marina to a private investor who tore down the dock and built a new one bolted to concrete pylons 6 feet below the waterline. The new dock is not a vessel. It is real estate. And it is taxable. I still live in the same town. I still see the people whose lives I ruined. They do not talk to me. They do not look at me. But I know they remember. I know that every time they see a kayak, they think of me. And that is enough. I am not a lawyer. I am not a maritime expert. I am not a hero. I am just someone who refused to let go of something small until it became something big. I turned a 12-minute mistake into a 4-year crusade. I bankrupted a town over a principle, and I would do it again. Because I am the undisputed admiral of my own principles. I lost my savings. I lost my reputation. I lost access to water itself. But I won the argument. And in the end, that is all that matters. If this story made you feel anything, leave a comment. I will read it from my landlocked apartment.